The views and opinions expressed on the Middle Class VO podcast are solely those of the hosts and guests. Any feelings hurt therein are an unfortunate byproduct of the quest for infotainment. Also, please be reminded that concerted efforts have been made so as not to put anyone's knickers in a twist. Having one's knickers in a twist is not an objective or goal. However, if your knickers are in a twist and it persists for more than 4 hours, please seek out a physician. Moreover, if anyone were to feel besmirched by any of the commentary on the Middle Class VO podcast, it would be purely coincidental. No besmirchment is intended. Please enjoy.
Very excited, Bobby. We have a great guest on, and it is our first casting director.
And who doesn't want to know what goes on in the casting part of this business, right?
Absolutely. We're all curious about what happens once we submit those auditions, and we're going to find out what happens when we do submit those auditions. Lynn Wissner is joining us next.
If you need e-learning, we're just an email away. Corporate narration, tell us what to say. Explainer video, imaging radio, slinging local cars, reading IVR. No, we ain't no stars. This is the Middle Class VO podcast. The Middle Class VO podcast. The Middle Class VO podcast.
So excited to have the owner of Voices Voice Casting, one of the founders of the VO Roadshow. She has over 25 years experience in casting and coaching. Lynn Wissner, welcome to the Middle Class VO podcast.
We're not worthy.
Oh my gosh, I'm not. Are you kidding?
Lynn, we're so excited to have you on.
Well, thank you.
I want to get started by, of course, you're a casting director. You cast voices all the time, and you're a voiceover coach. You do that as well. Let's go back to the beginning, though. Mm-hmm. How did you first dip your toe into this whole industry?
Oh my gosh. Well, briefly, trying to be. I grew up here in LA. My father was a TV producer, so I grew up around the industry. And then when I was in high school, I started acting, and then I started doing a lot of TV commercials on into college, and mostly for the money. And
of course,
it was just really, really fun. But I didn't really want to be an actress. I loved it, but I kind of wanted something a little more steady. And so when I graduated college, I couldn't get a job. My degree was in broadcast journalism. And I saw an ad in the Hollywood Reporter for an assistant agent. And I didn't know it at the time, but it was with Don Pitts, who sort of founded the whole business of voiceover agenting. So I applied for the job, and I got it. And he was just a wonderful, wonderful mentor. And his clients were, the who's who of voiceover at the time: Casey Kasem, Orson Welles, Gary Owens, June Foray, you name it. The young Bob.
Oh
Burke.
my gosh! Wow.
Incredible. And Don was just one of those people that said, just go in the booth and direct Orson on this spot. I'm like, what?
What?
I was this, 22-year-old kid just kind of winging it. But I had, I think because I had such a pretty decent on-camera acting background, I was very comfortable with it. And I loved actors. I really just loved it and had a great time. And then he left. Don left after I think almost a year. And the owner of the agency asked me to stay on and take over the voiceover department, which I had to rebuild because, of course, all Don's clients went with him. And I did that. So I did that for about another 2 years. And I didn't love agenting necessarily at that time. And again, this was all pre-internet and all that. And I got offered a job at the Voice Caster in Burbank to be a casting director. And at that time, that was the only casting facility in the country. I mean, you didn't have online, you didn't have anything but the Voice Caster. So nonstop, all day long, 24/7, we were casting. I mean, there was about 4 or 5 of us casting girls, and we'd be in a booth all day, and I could be casting commercials, animation, narrations, all in one day, and it was just nonstop. It was so much fun, and it was so creative. And I just fell in love with it. And, but after about 2 years there, I was sort of like, well, I could do this on my own. And with a little loan from my parents, I started Voices Voice Casting. And have been doing that ever since. And since then, 30 years ago, I've cast thousands and thousands of radio and TV commercials and video games and animation series and features and ADR and whoever needed a voice. And then I started teaching about 25 years ago, and I just love it. I absolutely love it.
And you're still a talent too, right? I mean, do you?
Yeah. So, and I got back into kind of the acting side of it years ago, because producers would say, "Oh, I like your voice too. Make sure you read on that." But this is when I was working at the VoiceCaster. So I don't ever put myself on things that I cast because I feel like that's a little awkward and weird. So so I have an agent here, and I do it too. So I'm kind of back in the fray with that and just loving it. I mean, I'm sort of consider voiceover world my third child, and it's just, I have 2 human daughters.
Did they follow you in the business? They're in the business, aren't they?
Kind of, they sort of did. My older daughter, she acted, and my ex-husband is an on-camera commercial casting director, so it's just totally in our family.
Yeah.
And she started doing commercials when she was 5 because she just had to get in there, and did very, very well. And then when she graduated college, she also didn't really want to be an actor. Now she works at CBS in casting. And then my youngest daughter graduated college this year, and she just started also at CBS completely coincidentally. And so she wants to get into set design and decorating. So, it's all in our family. It's just in our blood. And it's kind of fun. Yeah, they grew up around, seeing both sides, the on-camera world and the voiceover world. And so they're very comfortable around actors as well, and just the creative side. And like I said, my family was in the business. So it's just who we are.
Very cool.
A penny for your thoughts.
Mary Lynn, we want to get into the nitty-gritty of the casting side of things.
Sure.
We have mostly voice actors that listen to the podcast, and they're going to want to know, when they send that audition in and you get it, tell us step by step kind of what happens, your reactions, and all the things that go on.
Wow, that's a loaded question. Well, if it's a casting that I've done, likely I will have gotten it through their agent, or if they're students of mine, I send copy out to students a lot of times just because they're probably really good for something and don't have an agent or whatever. It's not their fault. So when I get all these auditions back for a particular, say it's a commercial, on the first pass, I'm only listening to the first line because there's no way I'm going to sit there and listen to 80 auditions all the way through. And I, after just all these years of casting, I can tell from their first line or two, did they fit the specs? Did they interpret the copyright, the direction, the casting specs? Do they sound interesting? Is there something that's drawing me into their read? And then I narrow that down to, like, I take probably about, cut that in half. And then I'll go back and listen to those, that other half's the whole audition. And then usually my clients, because I work with major advertising agencies and some, smaller production companies, but the reason most of them hire a casting director as opposed to, say, an online thing is they don't want to sit there and listen to 100 auditions. They want me to send them the 10 or 20 best, and that's it. So I kind of get all the messy stuff out of the way and give them the 10 or 20 best. So what pops out to me is, how did they pull me in that first line? What did they do? Is it's not only the sound of their voice, but is there something that's making me feel like they're talking to me, and I'm drawn into their delivery and just the way they're talking and the way that they're not reading, but they're approaching me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I'm listening for. And I think just because I've done this for so long, in a way, I'm sort of jaded and I've heard everything. So, surprise me, if you can intrigue me and a kind of a bored, jaded ad agency executive, then you're going to, likely be cast on the spot.
So are there any, I know the conversational read has been hot for a while now. Are there any other trends that you see on the horizon or things that are kind of coming back that are standing out in the auditions that you get, or more importantly, what the producers or directors are looking for?
that real person, is still super in. But I have noticed, especially this year, it's even more thrown away. Last year and the year before, and up to maybe 10 years ago, everything was real person, but it still had to be a little bit bright. It still had to be a little bit more conversational and not necessarily upbeat and kind of on, but a little bit more, chatty, I would say. This year, I've noticed a lot more of my clients asking actors to be more downplayed, more, throwing it away, more cavalier, more casual. It's not, remember last year, 2 years, everything was that millennial read. They're not asking that. I'm not getting that anymore, but it's on the verge of that. It's just not as distracted sounding. It's just a little bit more intimate, if that makes sense. It's just sort of thoughtful, reflective kind of real person.
Okay.
Mary Lynn, what's the Bobby and I know what next means. Can you please explain from the casting director's perspective what next is, and what is the quickest way for a voice actor to be treated with the next treatment?
In my mind, when I say that, it's because most of the time, and I don't mean it to sound, cavalier or disrespectful. It's just that the read, the voice is nothing standing out to me. It's nothing special in the delivery. Again, and I always tell actors this, the reason you're on that call is because you fit the specs, but you have to remember that the other 70, 80 actors that are on that call also fit the specs. So you're all pretty much going to sound the same. You're all going to have pretty much the same sound demographic, due to your age and just kind of, you fit those specs. So if you don't do something special, that's what I was saying about in your first line, and you just read that first line kind of in a nice reading voice, I promise you about 3/4 of the other people on that audition call are going to do it exactly the same.
Yeah.
So that's why when I hear that, again, it's in no disrespect to the person's voice or their abilities or anything like that. It's just, next. It didn't impress me. It didn't stand out. So that's why I just, I kind of think I need to make a motto, first line, make that stand out, because if that doesn't catch me, then you get the next.
Perfect.
So then does a slate throw you off, or do you prefer?
That is a great question too, because that's the big dilemma right now. Do we slate or not slate? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm one of those people where I'm kind of really digging this no slating thing. Sometimes I get, most of the time actually, when I'm listening back to auditions, I'm in this zone. So I'm kind of, everything's quiet in the office. My ears are closed and I'm listening, and then I'm just punching those MP3s, and somebody's slate sometimes can throw me off. And it's either, what throws me off is that they just say their name so fast and I get, a little bit thrown off my zone there. Excuse me. Or they mumble their speech, or, their name is just so long and whatever. So it kind of takes me out of the zone. And then I sort of miss the first few words of their first line. So the slate can be a make or break too, I think. So I'm kind of a fan of this not slating. You don't need to. Your name is on the MP3 file, or it definitely should be. And obviously some agents are very particular about that and want you to slate or whatever, and you have to defer to your agent. But it can be distracting, and it can also just be nothing. So
let's talk a little bit about your coaching background. I feel when I'm looking for a coach, or that first time I'm working with a coach, I have to feel really comfortable. And that's one thing, Mary Lynn, that you're the tops at. I mean, if you're making me feel good about being there, and I'm not being, I'm going to get the criticism, but I'm still going to be made to feel like, I don't want to say worthy, but, I just want to feel comfortable with you to begin with. And I think you're excellent out there about that. But what else, how is your style different from other coaches?
Well, what I've noticed is there's a good couple handfuls of coaches out there that are sort of in the top tier of coaches, if you will. And we all kind of have our thing, I don't want to say gimmick, but sort of our thing. Mine has always been, I coach from the casting perspective. What I know books. I sort of call it cut to the chase. This is what you need to know. These are the popular directions that all advertising for radio and TV come from. If you know how to do these 5 directions, you will be golden. And then we work on what it takes for you to jump into each one of those directions. Because every single talent is going to have a little bit of a different MO, So my goal with each talent when I'm coaching them is to sort of, and you might remember, when we work together, I say it's kind of like creating a recipe or a formula, so that from now on, when Bobby sees the real person, she knows, okay, I need to do A, B, and C, or whatever it is. So everybody can kind of create their own, pattern or rhythm or formula for each particular direction. Other coaches, come from different backgrounds, whether they were an actor themselves and an agent or whatever, an engineer. So they all kind of bring something different. I don't believe in tearing somebody down to build them up. I just don't. To me, that's just sort of what good is that going to do? It's more of that doesn't make sense to me. I'm more about let's collaborate and work together to make you the best you can be. And sometimes it doesn't work. I mean, I have had times where, I've had to tell some talent, you need to go back to acting 101, or, that bank job sounds pretty good.
Truth hurts, baby.
It does. And I don't, never do I want to be the person to crush somebody's dreams. And like I said, that's rarely ever been the case where I've had to say that. But, I'd rather be much, very honest with somebody than lead them along, because my name goes out there with you too. So yeah. I think that's what sort of separates me, makes me a little different than other coaches. Again, it's my background, my expertise, which is definitely casting, and coming from an acting side too. And what I know books, because I just know certain things as a casting director always stand out, not only to me, but to the ad agency producers and such. So that's what I teach.
Tell us more.
And Mary Lynn, you have teamed up with other top-tier voice acting coaches to form the VO Roadshow, where you travel around city to city and put on all-day workshops. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, this is just so much fun. I came up actually with the idea several years ago when the Antiques Roadshow was, so popular on TV, and I'm like, ooh, the VO Roadshow, that would be cool. And it kind of I locked it in the back of my brain. And then, the past couple of years, I just started to see sort of an onslaught of these coaching opportunities or workshop opportunities around. And my fellow coaches who are good friends of mine, Tom Pinto and Jeff Howell, one day we were all just sort of talking about it, and we thought, wow, there's some charlatans out there, and we feel, so protective of talent and very obviously very proud of what we do in our coaching and our reputations, and how can we sort of elevate this coaching opportunity for people out there. Because a lot of times, like I host a thing out here in my office called the VO Pros, where we have workshops every week and so on, and guests, casting directors and producers and so on come in. And actors across the country have always said to me, I wish I could be in LA to do that. So we're talking, and we said, let's do our own thing. It's just, we'll come to cities and, no more than, 10 to 15 talent. And we'll have 2 or 3 coaches, and we'll break it up in sort of a round robin sort of day. And it's intense, nonstop workout, with lunch included. And so it was more about let's bring what we do the best of. I'm best at commercials, Pinto is great at narrations and promo, and Scott Parkin is fabulous at improv, and Jeff is great at promos and narrations as well. So we all kind of will adjust it to the city, and that's kind of what we did. And it's gotten an amazing response. We're so excited. Last year was our first year, and we just put out the new schedule for 2020. So yeah, it's kind of fun, and it's great for us. And as a casting director, it's really great for me because I get to know people in these cities that I might not really get a chance to hear or work with otherwise. So it's been wonderful that I've been able to then subsequently reach out and send them castings and things like that too.
And you can get a little mini vacation out of it too.
Yeah, we did. It depends on the city. Like sometimes we've come in a little bit earlier. Because I had never actually, been to Chicago. So it was great. I had Jeff and I got there a couple days earlier and, did a little sightseeing and, just depending on the city. And of course, our time and schedule, we'll come in a little bit early, but, yeah, it's great. It's really fun. And again, like I said, every city is a little bit different and the talent's a little bit different. So it's great for me, again, as a casting director, to really kind of immerse myself, not only in that city, but the talent. And I love it. I just absolutely love it.
That's Scatworthy.
Mary Lynn, we're going to let you go here in just a second. Before we go, I was curious about going back to the casting. Can you think of one or two of your biggest casting jobs and where you thought, wow, I just cast this?
Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh.
I mean, you worked with Orson Welles already. We know that.
But I was an assistant agent then. And then he died shortly thereafter. It wasn't because of my directing. But gosh, there's so many that I'm super duper proud of. I right off the top of my head, I think, do you remember those Chevron talking cars?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That I was in on the ground floor of that casting, that was several years ago. And that was exciting because it was such a different sort of advertising thing. And we had to go find super duper real people. And, I went to the mall with a DAT recorder and was recording people like, tell me about your car. And then they would take that and write the copy around it. And one thing I'm super proud of, and I always think because my dad was a World War II vet, I've done a number of things for History Channel, but one thing I just really loved was this series called The Color of War. And it was 13 episodes, and we had to cast about 30 voices per episode, French, German, English, British, and they were all sort of they were stories from people's journals and newspaper articles, and as well as historic figures that we had to find voice matches for. So it was really, really rewarding. And I was so happy my dad got to see it before he passed away. And it was something that meant a lot to me to kind of, honor him, I guess. Just recently I did a spot that's running now that I'm super proud of because the client thought for sure they wanted a male. And I always sometimes will throw in a ringer or two, and I threw in a couple females. This was an Alfa Romeo campaign, and they cast a female.
Nice.
So yeah. And that's
cool.
That's just casting. You just kind of, you want your client wants you to kind of shake their brains a little bit. And, so I have a lot of favorites, a lot that mean a lot to me in my career, but those are ones that just kind of stand out at this minute now. In half an hour, it might be different.
Are you coming back to VO Atlanta in the spring?
Yes, I will be there. I'm leading the commercial track, and it's one of my most favorite conferences for sure. So we've got some great, guests coming in for the commercial track, and I'm excited to be there. It's really just a fun event and such a great learning opportunity for everybody.
So you'll be at VO Atlanta in the spring, and you'll be on the road with the VO Roadshow. Lots going on with Mary Lynn Wissner. If you want to check Mary Lynn out and the VO Roadshow, you can go to voicesvoicecasting.com. And Mary Lynn, are you taking on new coaching clients?
Yes, I do take on new people. I usually only work with working pros because just my time is limited, and I feel like if you're a total beginner, you need to start with a workshop type situation. So sure, I always suggest, reach out to me, send me an email, voicesvoicecasting@gmail.com, and we'll talk.
That sounds great. Mary Lynn, thank you so much for your time, and thanks for sharing all of your insight on the Middle Class VO podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mary Lynn. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. I'll talk to you later.
Oh, she is amazing. And I do love that she is a talent and a casting person and a coach, because she gets it. And I think that's why she's one of my favorite coaches out there. So good to have her on the show.
Yeah, she knows all sides of it, all aspects, and she directed Orson Welles. My goodness.
I know. Oh, and by the way, I directed Orson Welles.
Yes, I was an up-and-comer. You know. I was just getting my feet wet and I was directing Orson Welles, so you know. Mary Lynn is great, and as she mentioned, if you want to reach out to her, it's voicesvoicecasting@gmail.com if you're interested in coaching with Mary Lynn, and you can just go to voicesvoicecasting.com to check out everything about Mary Lynn Wissner. Great job today, Bobby. Always fun to have you on the Middle Class VO podcast since you are the co-host.
And remembered, well, thanks, Kev. And remember to subscribe to our podcast, too, whether you check us out on iTunes or Podbean or Instagram or any of the other different ways you can get to us. Subscribe to us. It means a lot.
Thanks for joining us today.
Bye-bye.
The Middle Class VO podcast is a K2 Media Productions production.
All views and opinions expressed are those of the hosts and guests. The McVob jingle was written and produced by Kevin.
Co-produced and performed by Chloe Dolandis.
Additional engineering by Zach Zimmett.
Bobby's hair and makeup by Rebecca Adlita.
Kevin's wardrobe by Slippery Pete's Fashion Emporium.
All previous episodes are available for download on Podbean.
For the Middle Class VO podcast, I'm Tracy Thibodeau.
I'm Lisa Lou Perry.
Thanks for listening.
And don't miss the next episode of
The Middle Class VO Podcast. The Middle Class VO Podcast.